Hey Saki, want to learn how to make a mandala? Listen Saki, I know most people say mandala, but I just can't make my mouth say that. I think I'm suffering from the Mandela effect. Alright, let's do this. Let's get our supplies together. Here's what you'll need. First, you're going to need some paper. You can make a mandala on almost any type of paper or flat surface, but higher quality paper or cardstock will make a real difference while you're working and will give you better results. Personally, I'm in love with the Smooth Bristol 100-pound heavyweight cardstock by Strathmore. It's my favorite surface for any kind of ink work. It's high quality, it's bright white, it has a very fine tooth which makes it easy to mix colors, and I just love everything about it. Bristol's smooth surface is a little bit more expensive than other cardstock because it is a professional grade material, but I think it's really worth it. I usually use a coupon to buy this cardstock and I can get it for less than $10. You're also going to need a ruler when designing your mandala. Although a normal ruler will work for this project, a T-ruler can help you make perpendicular lines very easily, and you can get a T-ruler like the one you see here for about $3. You're also going to need a way to add circles to the mandala. A simple compass like the one you used in school will work perfectly. If you don't have a compass, you can probably improvise with common items from around your home, and we'll talk more about doing that later. You're probably going to need a protractor. A protractor is a tool that allows you to measure angles, which is very helpful when creating mandalas. Most protractors look like half circles, but some are full circles. If you don't have a protractor, you can still easily create an 8-segment mandala using the edges of the square to determine the angles, and I'll show you that workaround later on in the video. If you do decide to purchase a protractor, don't buy it from the architect section of the craft store. You'll just end up spending $15 that way. Go to the part of the store that sells children's school supplies and buy a $2 protractor. After all, it's all the same angles. You're going to need a pencil. Choose a pencil that lets you sketch lightly because you're going to be erasing a lot of the pencil work after you add ink. And you're going to need an eraser that won't tear your paper. Any eraser should work as long as it's not old and crusty and gross and dried out. Don't use an eraser like that. If you want to really find the greatest eraser ever, I suggest the Tombow Dual Sand Eraser, which has little bits of sand embedded in the rubber and erases things that no normal eraser can get rid of. You're going to need a pen or a fine line marker to draw the lines of your mandala after sketching them. Choose the highest quality pen you have. You'll want it to be smudge-proof because you'll be erasing lines later after you add ink. Also, depending on how you plan to add color later, you'll want to make sure that your pen is color-fast and waterproof. You don't want your clean black lines smudging and dissolving and smearing if you add watercolor or a wet medium later. Look for the words water-fast, waterproof, or water-resistant on the pen or its packaging. For a project like this, I typically use either a Pitt Artist pen or a Prismacolor fine line marker. Keep in mind that you don't necessarily have to buy an entire set of these pens. Many craft stores like Michael's sell open stock art pens, so you can spend just a few dollars and have one really good fine pen. A fine line Sharpie would also work for this project, but be aware that Sharpie ink may bleed through the paper depending on what type of paper you're using. Keep a scrap piece of paper near you and test your pencil, your eraser, and your pen before you start. And remember to use the same kind of paper for practice that you use for your project. Finally, you'll need whatever medium you want to use to add color. You can keep it simple and use one medium like colored pencils or gel pens or markers, or you could layer one medium on top of another to get a more complex look. You could even go really crazy with metallic embellishments, foil, whatever else seems like a good idea for adding color. If you're like me, you might want to wait until after you sketch and outline the mandala before deciding how to add color. Not to get too philosophical about it, but I have noticed that if I approach a mandala with only the vaguest idea of what I want to do, the process is a lot more enjoyable and the results tend to be much better. I find myself entering almost a meditative state when I'm making a mandala, and I get really good ideas about how to add color, what colors to use once I achieve that state. So that's the goal. And now that we've got our supplies together, let's make some art. The first step to getting good results is cutting down the paper to a perfect square. Be careful as you cut the square. Try to get the measurements as exact as possible. This will be important later. Once you're done cutting the square, you have to find its exact center point. To do this, add pencil lines that divide the square in half, both vertically and horizontally. Use your ruler and pencil to add a small mark to the midpoint of each edge of the paper. I'm working on paper that is 8 inches by 8 inches, so I make a small line at the 4-inch mark on each side of the square. Then use a ruler to connect the opposing marks. This is where a T-ruler comes in handy. It makes drawing perpendicular lines very easy. But you can use a regular ruler to add these lines if you don't have a T-ruler. When you're finished, you'll see that the spot where the two lines cross is the exact center of the paper, and you may want to just put a little dot to mark that spot. Once you determine that center spot, it's time to add segment divisions and concentric circles that radiate out from the center. You can do this in a couple of different ways. You can put down segment division lines first and then add circles, or you can add one or more circles to the paper first and then use your protractor to measure the segment divisions. I find it easiest to add one circle to the center of the paper using a protractor and then add the segment divisions. Most protractors are transparent, and they tend to have some kind of marking that indicates the center of the circle. You can see that mine has a little cross that I can line up with the cross I drew on my paper, and that way I know that the circle will be centered exactly on that spot. Line up your protractor on the center of your paper and then trace the half circle. Then turn the protractor upside down, line up the center again, and trace the other half. You could also use a compass to add the initial circle. Just measure the radius of the protractor so that you get a circle of about the same size. When you're done, you should have something that looks like this. Okay, so I'm going to try to keep the boring numbers part really short. Bear with me. To design a mandala with equally sized segments, you have to do a tiny bit of math. A circle is 360 degrees all the way around. One trick I like to do is think about the basic multiplication tables and remember which combinations equal 36. 9 times 4 equals 36, 6 times 6 equals 36, 18 times 2 equals 36, and so on. You can add a 0 to any of the base numbers to get 360 as your answer. In other words, if 9 times 4 equals 36, then 90 times 4 equals 360. So, what does any of that have to do with making mandalas? Well, it means that if I use 90-degree angles to divide my mandala, I'll end up with 4 equally sized segments. And that's exactly what you're seeing on the paper at this point, a circle divided into 4 90-degree segments. It works in reverse too. 4 times 9 is 36, so 40 times 9 is 360. If I divide the circle into 40-degree segments, I'll end up with 9 of them. In fact, that's what I'm going to do with this mandala, divide it into 9 segments. I erase the cross lines first, so they don't compete with the lines I'm about to add. You can see that I make a mark at 0 degrees, and then I count 40 degrees on the protractor, and then I make a little mark at the degree part. Then I count 40 more degrees, and I make another mark, and so on. When I run out a protractor, I just adjust it so that the last mark I made lines up with 0 degrees, and then I just count 40 degrees. When I'm finished, the circle is divided into 9 equal segments. So after marking the division points on the circle, use your ruler to draw light pencil lines that start at your center dot, go through each division point, and continue to the edge of the paper. Now, at the beginning of the video, I mentioned that you can easily make an 8-sided mandala, which is comprised of 45-degree segments, without a protractor. To do this, all you need is a ruler. Add the cross lines to the paper like you saw before, and then use your ruler to draw 2 diagonal lines through the corners of the square, making a big X on top of the cross. Make sure that each line you draw goes from the center of one corner through the exact center of the cross and then to the center of the opposite corner. Then do the same with the other 2 corners. When you're finished, you should be looking at something like a square pizza with 8 slices. After adding segment divisions to the square, it's time to add concentric circles. Use your compass to add the circles, starting small and getting bigger. Make sure that the pointy part of the compass goes into the same spot each time you make a new circle. And don't press too hard with the pencil as you add circles. Remember, you will end up erasing most of these pencil marks later. When you're done, you should have something that looks like the outlines of a dartboard. When you rotate the square, it should look pretty much the same no matter which way you turn it. Now, even though using a compass can be a little clunky and annoying, it makes adding circles pretty straightforward. But what can you do if you don't have a compass? Earlier in the video, I mentioned that you can make circles using common items from around the house. It's true, you can. We all know the thing of tracing the edges of a drinking glass or a plate to make a circle, but what about using a paper clip? Unbend the paper clip so that it's shaped like an S. Then take a clicky pen, but don't click it. You don't want to get ink on the paper. Just use the pen in its unclicked state as an anchor for the paper clip, or maybe find a pen that has a pointy cap and use that. I don't know. Just don't accidentally get ink onto your paper at this stage. Then use the pencil to trace the circle using the other side of the paper clip. And if you have paper clips in various sizes, you can make different size circles. Or what about one of those twist tie things that make it impossible to get something out of its packaging? Take one of those and twist a little loop into each end, and then use it the same way you used the paper clip. This method is pretty cool because you can change the size on one of the loops in order to make different sized circles. It might seem a little bit clumsy and you might need to clean up the lines a little bit, but that's why you brought an eraser to this party, right?
Hey, Cranky. Is it because I'm cooking? What's the problem?
Okay, now that the math and planning are done, it's time to get down to the fun part. Starting in the center, lightly sketch something into one segment of the smallest circle. It can be anything you want, a shape, a flower, a word, even just a couple of lines. Then sketch the exact same thing into the next segment, making it look as similar to the first segment as possible. Continue rotating the paper and adding the same sketch until you filled all the segments and completed the first circle. Then move on to the next circle out and repeat the process using a different design element. It might not look like much early on, but by the time you fill in a few circles, you'll start to see your mandala taking shape. I think I'm going to turn down my talking, turn up the music, and speed time up during the sketching. When you're done sketching out the basic design of the mandala, it's a good idea to go back and erase some of the lines that you don't want to ink over. I usually erase most of my division lines, as well as any spots where I had to go in and add multiple lines to refine a shape. Strictly speaking, you really don't have to clean up the sketch before starting to add ink, because you will be erasing the rest of the pencil after the ink is dry. It is really up to you. I just do this part so that I don't accidentally ink something like a dividing line or a circle outline.
Say, I love you.
Now it's time to add the ink outlines. Put on some music that you like. Put your Doberman someplace where he won't suddenly jump on your lap and mess you up. Channel your inner confident person, become the pen, and let the pencil marks be your Sherpa. Remember, all things serve the beam. Okay, let's say you're back and the ink is dry, and it's time to add the color, which is probably why you got into this thing anyway. Well, I'm not gonna lie, this is the fun part. I'm using 8 Prismacolor markers for this piece. Note how I tried to roll them into the shot so that their names would show, and then got all flustered trying to arrange them, and you can't see any of the names. Bygones. The point is that you don't need very many colors to get wow factor. Choose a few colors that you think look good together, and then just do what feels right. this is the final product. This is how my mandala turned out. I did some shading and some layering to add more depth and dimension. I also used a Prismacolor colorless blending marker for some of the color mixing, which gives you some of that faded, washed out look in the larger areas of color. Overall, I'm very happy with this mandala. I'm not very good at performing for a camera like a circus monkey yet, so I probably can make some improvements in the way I demonstrated this. Maybe you can tell me in the comments, what did you think about this video? Should I make more instructional videos like this? Isn't Saki awesome? How could I make the video better? Tell me what you didn't like, constructively if possible. If it's that you wish the lines of my work surface lined up with the shot, girl, I feel you on that. Me too. I've got this weird setup where the phone camera is hanging from a contraption above me, sort of like Tom Cruise in any Mission Impossible movie. So there's that. If you think the sound quality sucks, it's because my house has a ground loop issue. And so the TIFCO voiceover recording studio is my car with the windows rolled up. Is there a lesson here? Yes, there is. You do what you can with what you have to work with. And this is likely to be a continuing motif, or should I say motif, in my videos. If this video has turned you off from the idea of ever trying to make a mandala, you can still have one by purchasing one of mine. See the handy Etsy link below. And one more thing. I had planned to make my regular kind of parting salvo be something along the lines of like and subscribe or the dog gets it. It's kind of a riff on an old National Lampoon magazine cover, but my friend said that people would blast me in the comments for advocating animal cruelty. So let me be clear. When I say like and subscribe or the dog gets it, what I really mean is like and subscribe and I'll give Saki even more bacon than he normally gets. Just to be clear on that. Also, I'm pretty sure Saki could take me in a fight. Thanks for watching. Have a great rest of the day. And I'm out like that.